I just got into BookTok and BookTube this year, there were some recommendations that I took to heart. And people who had like similar tastes as me were recommending them. And they were not good. I want to share with you the most 7 overrated books, in my opinion, obviously. The first comes from the people who are like, really love the enemies to lovers trope, and that is Serpent and Dove. I read the first book and felt pretty underwhelmed. It felt very tropey. I wasn't convinced that any of the characters' motivations or their own like transformation from enemies to lovers was even close to convincing. It felt forced, and I didn't really understand what was the ultimate shift in the end. It fell flat for me. The next was probably the book that I was most disappointed to not like. I was so looking forward to reading it because so many people I knew loved it and were recommending it, especially for those like high fantasy girlies, and that is Priory of the Orange Tree. I bought the book because I like wanted to physically have it because it was so long, and I thought it was just gonna be this like dense, beautiful world building. And it was. I thought it was really interesting plot-wise. The POV shifting was not my favorite. It felt like it was 200 to 300 pages longer than it needed to be. The plot felt unnecessarily dragged out. The first 75% is long and drawn out, and the last 25% is like, and then it happened and it was done. The end. I felt like the story could have been done better, and it deserved better than that ending. I will probably not be reading the second book that's coming out, even though I know it's highly anticipated for this next year. I just lost faith in it. The characters were fine, but felt like they deserved better endings, and maybe that will be the second book, but overall, I felt like I put in a lot of emotional and time investment into the piece for it to fall flat at the end. This next series really peaked in mid-2000s, but I feel like it's having a resurgence in the BookTok/BookTube community, and I, for the life of me, do not understand. That is the Shatter Me series. I read the first book, and it felt very kitschy with the like repetitiveness of it, the crossing out of words. Like, it was a style, it was a choice. I don't know when it came out, but it felt very like 2012, 2014, that era. Like the Divergent Hunger Games like peak era, and I could see myself really liking it then, maybe, but now it's like it had its time, and I think we're done with it. The characters' motivations did not make sense to me, and it's supposed to be enemies to lovers, but I don't understand that. The main character knew this love interest for like 5 seconds, and then suddenly we're like, oh no, of course he's in love with her. Of course he is. Why? Like, in what world? That does not make sense to me. You have to have some sort of established foundation relationship in order for me to root for you, and it just felt weird, and it felt like I was supposed to buy into this relationship without any evidence of why. It was a really fast read, so I'm glad I didn't waste time, but I finished it being like, really? Like, that's what we're all obsessed with? Along the same lines, I don't feel like people were as hyped about this book, but I did see it recommended a lot. Again, an enemies to lovers trope, and that is the Red Queen series. I just read the first 2 books, and the only reason I read the second book was because it ends on a big cliffhanger. The second book also ends on a big cliffhanger, but I can't remember what it is now, so I don't really want to read the third one. The characters, again, they just fall flat. The motivation feels forced. The author is a screenwriter, I think. And I feel like you can tell, it reads like a movie. It's not super descriptive. It's a lot of facial choreography. I learned that term. So like, he raised an eyebrow, her eyes widened, a lot of that throughout it. It was really hyped up, and I had been wanting to read it for a while because everyone's like, oh, it's so good. No, it's not. It's underrated. It's overrated for sure. I'm kind of scared to share this next one because I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of hate. I saw these books on a lot of people's 2022 favorite reads, as well as like people's like all-time favorite books. The Shadow Bone series, as well as the Crooked Kingdom series. I read Crooked Kingdom, and people were like, oh my gosh, Kaz, like, oh my gosh. What do you mean, oh my gosh? Like, okay, I get it. You have trauma. You've been through things. I'm fine if that's your story and that is like what is supposed to be the, like, this is who he is. But to have him also be a jerk that we're supposed to be sympathetic toward, I don't get it. I also read, again, Shadow and Bone. I just don't understand why we're rooting for these characters, or why they're sympathetic, or why we should care what happens to them, or what they even want in it. I think the concept in this like Grisha universe is really interesting. I feel like it could have been done better. Both of these, it just fell flat. I didn't read the second book of The Crooked Kingdom, and I finished the second book, and I didn't finish the third book, and the bone one. I started the third one. I literally don't care about your romance. Like, there's no reason for me to want you two to be together. He just seems possessive. Both of them, I think that's it. They both just seem like they aren't rooting for their person, and it's just like weirdly possessive, and that's an ick for me. This other one, again, I am scared to share because so many people love it, and again, it was on so many people's top list. Haley Pham literally said it was one of her favorite books this year, and I saw it, my jaw dropped. I was like, no. I think she said that for Shatter Me too. It's like, no. That's so cringe. It's the Cruel Prince series by Holly Black. I really like the character of Judith. I think that's her name. I think that's such a fun character and such a fun concept. The world feels sparse to me. I feel like there could have been more world building in it. I don't understand how they went from enemies to lovers. It was like all of a sudden she's like, I like you now, but I don't, but I do. I'm like, I feel like we needed more interactions of them that wasn't just like them at each other's throats for that to make sense. And Judith seems so power hungry. I don't understand how she was, like, the temptation of romance was even an idea for her. It seemed at odds for her character. It felt predictable. Again, I felt like every part I was like, yep, this is how it's gonna end. And that's exactly how it ended. Overrated for sure. This final book, I kind of want to read the second one just to see if I like it better, but I struggled to read it. There wasn't anything bad about it, except that it just felt like it dragged the 5th season. People list this book up with the Stormlight Archives, which I talked about in the last video, as one of their favorite all-time fantasy books. And I don't really get it. I was surprised by the ending. Like, maybe like halfway through, I was like, I think this is what's happening. And it is what ended up happening, but it wasn't like super obvious. It felt so vague to me. The mystery didn't have any stakes to it for me, which made it hard to want to keep reading it. And because it kept switching POVs, it was hard to get into one single person's story and care about one single person because it was all so vague. Stakes were so low for so long for the overall plot, where individual scenes had stakes, but the overall plot didn't at all. I might read the second one just to see how the world turns out, because it was a lot of world building and I feel like it's been a lot of energy invested in that. I don't understand why people rave about it. If you think I should read the second one and you're like, no, you gotta stick it out, please tell me in the comments below. But other than that, I don't know. I don't like it. It felt overrated. Those are my overrated books for 2022. Let me know if you disagree in the comments, or if there are other books that you thought were way overrated. Maybe there were some I put in my favorites videos that you're like, no way, that was overrated. Tell me in the comments below here. I post pretty frequently on TikTok, so you can follow me there. Daily life stuff is on Instagram. Like and subscribe if you also think books are underrated. Oh my gosh, I keep saying that. If you also think books are overrated. See ya.